Wife wakes up to find her husband gone without a trace. Confused and heartbroken, she tries to contact him but fails. As the day progresses, she realizes not only has he left her, but their joint bank accounts are emptied, and important documents are missing from their home office. The morning sun spilled its golden light through the cracks in the curtains, casting a warm glow across the bedroom. Christine stirred from her sleep, reaching out for Justin, but her hand found only the cold, empty space beside her. She sat up, blinking the sleep from her eyes, her heart beginning to race. The other side of the bed was neatly made, an unusual occurrence that instantly filled her with a sense of unease. She called out, "Justin?" Her voice echoed through the silent house, met with no response. Christine's heart sank. This wasn't like him. Justin, her husband of 7 years, was a creature of habit, always leaving a note if he had to go out early. But today, there was nothing, no note, no text, no trace. With a growing sense of dread, Christine slid out of bed and walked through the house. The silence was oppressive, each room emptier than the last. The pictures of them together on the walls seemed to mock her with their frozen smiles. She checked her phone again, still no messages. In the kitchen, she found the coffee maker cold and unused. His keys were gone from the hook by the door, his wallet and phone missing from the counter where he always left them. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Returning to their bedroom, Christine noticed something even more unsettling. The drawer where they kept important documents, birth certificates, marriage license, financial records, was ajar. Heart pounding, she pulled it open. It was almost empty. Panic gripped her. What was happening? She tried calling Justin's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Had something happened to him? Or had he left her? But why? They hadn't been fighting, there were no signs of unhappiness. The reality of the situation began to sink in. He had left her. But why like this? Why without a word? Christine sat down at the kitchen table, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. She thought back over the past few weeks, searching for any signs she might have missed. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just the mundane routine of their daily life. Feeling a desperate need for answers, Christine decided to investigate. She started with their finances. Logging into their online banking, her heart dropped. The accounts were nearly empty. Thousands of dollars gone. It didn't make any sense. Justin wasn't the type to gamble or make impulsive purchases. They were saving for a vacation, for a future. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She needed to be strong, to understand the full extent of what had happened. She printed out the bank statements, her hands shaking. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. She called her best friend, Lisa, who came over immediately. Together, they pored over the bank statements and the few remaining documents, trying to piece together the puzzle. By the end of the day, Christine knew one thing for certain: Justin hadn't just left her, he had deceived her, perhaps for a long time. And she was determined to find out why. With Lisa's. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Diane's office, casting long stripes across the room. Christine sat across from her, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, feeling a mix of apprehension and resolve. Today, they would be meeting with a potential ally, someone who could provide critical insight into Justin's dealings. His name is Robert Clayton. He's an ex-financial investigator, now working as a consultant. If anyone can find where Justin funneled your money, it's him, Diane explained, checking her watch. He should be here any minute. The door opened, and a man in his early 50s entered. He had a sharp, analytical look about him, his eyes keen and observant. After brief introductions, they got down to business. Christine watched as Diane and Robert discussed the case, the room filled with a palpable intensity. Robert listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions. When they finished, he leaned back, his gaze fixed on Christine. "This isn't going to be easy," Robert said frankly. "The companies involved are shell corporations, designed to hide the money trail. But I've dealt with similar cases. I'm confident we can uncover something actionable." Christine felt a surge of hope. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Any personal information about Justin could be helpful. Habits, routines, contacts. Sometimes the smallest detail can break a case wide open," Robert replied. Over the next few days, Christine found herself diving into the memories of her life with Justin, searching for anything that might be relevant. She recounted stories to Robert and Diane, detailing business trips, casual mentions of colleagues, even seemingly inconsequential habits. Robert listened to every detail, taking meticulous notes. Meanwhile, the forensic accountant had made progress. He had traced some of the money to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, linked to one of the shell corporations. However, the trail went cold there. "The key is to find the real people behind these corporations," Robert said during one of their strategy meetings. "Shell companies are just a front. We need to uncover the individuals pulling the strings." As they delved deeper into the investigation, Christine found herself at the center of a network of support. Diane's legal expertise, Robert's investigative skills, and the accountant's financial acumen formed a formidable team. Christine contributed her intimate knowledge of Justin, painting a picture of a man she thought she knew. It wasn't long before their efforts started to bear fruit. A breakthrough came when Robert managed to connect one of the shell companies to a known white-collar criminal, a man with a history of fraud and embezzlement. "This could be our link to Justin," Robert announced during a meeting. "This individual has been on the radar of law enforcement for a while. If we can prove a connection between him and Justin, it could blow this case wide open." The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Christine's heart. Today would be the first time she would see Justin since he vanished, the day she would confront him in a court of law. Her emotions were a tumultuous mix of dread, anger, and a desperate need for closure. Diane's office was a flurry of activity as they prepared for the day ahead. Documents were rechecked, arguments rehearsed, and strategies refined. Christine, dressed in a somber suit, tried to steady her nerves, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You're ready for this," Diane reassured her, offering a supportive smile. "Remember, today is about setting the stage. We lay out our case, show the court we mean business." The courtroom was imposing, its walls echoing with the weight of justice. As Christine entered, she felt every eye upon her. She took her seat, her gaze fixed on the defendant's table, where Justin sat, looking markedly different from the man she remembered. His confident demeanor was replaced by a look of apprehension, his eyes avoiding hers. The judge entered, and the room fell into a respectful silence. The hearing began with the usual formalities, then moved swiftly to the heart of the matter. Diane was the first to speak, laying out their case with precision and clarity. She spoke of the missing funds, the shell companies, and the link to known criminals. Her words were like arrows, each one hitting its mark. Christine watched Justin as Diane spoke. He seemed unnerved, his lawyer whispering in his ear, his face a mask of barely concealed anxiety. It was clear he had underestimated Christine's resolve to seek justice. Then, it was the defense's turn. Justin's lawyer portrayed him as a successful businessman, arguing that the investments were legitimate and that Christine was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. But the evidence Diane presented was compelling, and the lawyer's arguments seemed to fall flat. As the hearing progressed, Christine felt a growing sense of empowerment. For months, she had felt like a victim of Justin's deceit. But here, in this courtroom, she was taking back control. She was no longer just reacting to his actions, she was confronting them head-on. A key moment came when Diane presented the evidence uncovered by Robert. The connection between Justin and the known criminal was a bombshell, sending murmurs through the courtroom. Christine saw Justin's composure crack, his facade beginning to crumble. The judge listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions. As the hearing drew to a close, he announced that the case would proceed to trial, citing the seriousness of the allegations and the evidence presented. As they left the courtroom, Christine felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly painful, but today was a victory. She had stood up to Justin, had faced him and his lies in a court of law. Diane placed a reassuring hand on Christine's shoulder. "This is just the beginning," she said. "But you were incredible in there. We have a long fight ahead, but I believe we can win this." In the weeks following the preliminary hearing, Christine and her legal team worked tirelessly to strengthen their case. The discovery of the link between Justin and the known criminal had opened new avenues of investigation, and they pursued each lead with relentless determination. Christine found herself immersed in a world she never knew existed, a world of hidden assets, offshore accounts, and shadowy figures operating on the fringes of legality. With each new revelation, her resolve to see Justin held accountable only grew stronger. The trial date approached rapidly, and the atmosphere in Diane's office was one of focused intensity. Christine spent long hours with Diane and Robert, going over testimonies and evidence, preparing for every possible scenario they might face in court. On the first day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. The story had caught the attention of the media, and reporters jostled for space, their cameras flashing. Christine took her place, feeling a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. She was ready to face Justin, ready to confront the lies and betrayal. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. Diane presented a detailed timeline of Justin's activities, supported by financial records and witness testimonies. The evidence of his involvement in the illegal investment scheme was overwhelming, painting a picture of a man driven by greed and deception. One of the most dramatic moments came when a key witness, a former associate of Justin's, took the stand. Under oath, he revealed the full extent of Justin's involvement in the scheme. His testimony was a turning point in the trial, eliciting gasps from the courtroom as he detailed the sophisticated methods Justin had used to hide his activities. Justin's defense team countered with arguments about business risks and market pressures, but their case was weak in the face of the prosecution's evidence. Justin himself took the stand, portraying himself as a misunderstood entrepreneur, but his words rang hollow, his explanations evasive and unconvincing. Throughout the trial, Christine remained a pillar of strength. She listened to every word, every piece of evidence, her presence in the courtroom a silent testament to her determination. She was no longer just a wronged wife, she was a key player in bringing a criminal to justice. As the trial neared its conclusion, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. When the jury retired to deliberate, Christine felt a surge of nervous anticipation. The hours dragged on, each minute stretching into an eternity. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his voice steady as he read the verdict, guilty on all counts. A wave of relief washed over Christine. Justice had been served. In the aftermath of the trial, as the reporters clamored for comments and the crowd slowly dispersed, Christine felt a profound sense of closure. The journey had been long and painful, but she had emerged stronger, more resilient. She thanked Diane and Robert for their unwavering support and dedication. As she walked out of the courthouse, she felt the weight of the past months lift from her shoulders. The future was uncertain, but she faced it with a newfound sense of confidence and hope. After winning $25 million in the lottery, a woman skillfully exacts revenge on her unfaithful husband, by covertly gaining control of his company and manipulating his career, leading to a stunning revelation of her dominance in both their personal and professional lives. Nicole Anderson stood in the modest kitchen of her suburban home, her hands trembling as she clutched the lottery ticket. The numbers on the TV screen matched hers, each digit confirming the unbelievable truth: she had won $25 million. Her mind raced with excitement and disbelief. For years, Nicole and her husband, Brandon, had struggled with finances, their dreams persistently out of reach. This windfall felt like a lifeline, a miraculous turn of fate. She couldn't wait to tell Brandon. Imagining his reaction, a mixture of shock and joy, brought a smile to her face. He had been working late nights at a tech startup, chasing a dream of making it big in the corporate world. Nicole often felt lonely in his absence, but she supported him unconditionally, believing in their shared future. As the evening sky darkened, Nicole prepared Brandon's favorite meal, humming to herself. The dining table was set with their best china, a bottle of champagne chilling beside it. She wanted everything to be perfect for the life-changing news. The sound of Brandon's car pulling into the driveway sent a rush of butterflies through her stomach. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. He entered the house, looking tired but flashing a smile upon seeing the spread. "Wow, what's the occasion?" Brandon asked, hanging his coat. "Just wait," Nicole beamed, her eyes sparkling with unshared joy. They sat down to dinner, and Nicole could hardly contain herself. As they ate, she observed Brandon, his familiar gestures, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She loved this man, with whom she had built a life full of ups and downs. Tonight, she believed, would mark the beginning of an incredible up. Finally, unable to wait any longer, Nicole reached for the lottery ticket and slid it across the table. "We won, Brandon. We won the lottery." Brandon's expression shifted from confusion to astonishment as he picked up the ticket. This is real?" "Yes." Nicole laughed, her heart swelling with happiness. "It's $25 million, Brandon. Our lives are going to change." They embraced, a whirlwind of laughter and tears, discussing what they could do with the money. Paying off debts, traveling, maybe even a new house. The possibilities seemed endless. But amidst the celebration, Nicole noticed Brandon's phone continuously buzzing. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. "Everything okay?" Nicole asked. "It's just work," he replied, quickly silencing the phone. But there was a hint of unease in his eyes that Nicole couldn't ignore. Later, while Brandon was in the shower, Nicole's curiosity got the better of her. She picked up his phone, intending only to silence it. But as she did, a message flashed across the screen that made her heart stop. It was from a woman named Emily, and it was unmistakably intimate. Confusion and dread washed over Nicole. Her hands shook as she opened the message thread, each message a dagger in her heart. There were dates, endearments, plans made in secret. The evidence was undeniable: Brandon was having an affair. Nicole felt the room spin around her. The joy of the lottery win evaporated, replaced by a deep, searing sense of betrayal. She sat there, the phone heavy in her hand, as a cold resolve began to take shape in her mind. Brandon had betrayed her, but she would not let this destroy her. She had $25 million, and with it, the means to make him regret ever deceiving her. Nicole's tears dried, and a new, unyielding determination took hold. The game had changed, and she was now the one in control. The days following the lottery win were a blur for Nicole. She moved through them like a ghost, her mind a tumultuous mix of pain and planning. The knowledge of Brandon's betrayal gnawed at her, but she wore a mask of normalcy, waiting for the right moment to act. Brandon, oblivious to Nicole's discovery, was caught up in his own world. He talked excitedly about the potential uses for the lottery winnings, not realizing that Nicole's plans had drastically shifted. Her dreams were no longer aligned with his, they were now focused on retribution. Nicole sought legal advice, setting up a trust to manage the lottery winnings. She wanted to ensure that her new fortune was protected from Brandon's reach, especially since she hadn't confronted him about the affair yet. Her lawyer, an astute woman who immediately sensed Nicole's distress, offered not just legal guidance but also a sympathetic ear. With her financial foundation secured, Nicole began her carefully crafted revenge. She had always been intelligent and resourceful, qualities that Brandon had admired but never fully appreciated. Now, she used these attributes to orchestrate a silent takeover of the company where Brandon worked. The company, a rising star in the tech industry, was Brandon's dream. He had often spoken of climbing its ranks, of one day leading it. Nicole remembered these conversations, once filled with shared hope, now tainted by betrayal. Utilizing a series of shell companies, Nicole started buying shares in the company. She meticulously researched and executed her plan, ensuring that her identity remained hidden. Through savvy investments and strategic acquisitions, she soon held a significant portion of the company's shares. With her financial clout, she subtly influenced company decisions, her presence unknown to those, including Brandon, who were affected by them. Meanwhile, Nicole maintained her role as the supportive wife at home, all while her inner turmoil raged. She watched Brandon, analyzing his every move, word, and expression. His moments of distraction, the secretive glances at his phone, stoked the flames of her resolve. As the weeks passed, Nicole's influence in the company grew. She learned the intricacies of its operations, the challenges it faced, and the key players in its hierarchy. Her moves were calculated, ensuring that her control increased without drawing attention. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Brandon shared exciting news. He had been promoted, a step closer to his dream position. Nicole congratulated him, her heart aching with a mix of sorrow and grim satisfaction. He didn't know that it was her maneuvering that had opened the path for his promotion, a path that would lead him to a destination he did not expect. "Everything's falling into place," Brandon said, smiling at Nicole. "We're finally getting what we deserve." Nicole nodded, a tight smile on her lips. "Yes, we are," she replied, her voice steady. In her eyes, there was a glint of something new, a steely resolve that had grown in the wake of her heartbreak. As Nicole retired to bed that night, she reflected on her journey so far. She was no longer just the betrayed wife, she was a woman in control, a silent puppeteer orchestrating a grand scheme. The days of innocence were long gone, replaced by the cold, hard game of revenge. And Nicole was playing to win. In the corporate world of high stakes and higher ambitions, Brandon Anderson was riding high. His recent promotion at the tech startup had been a welcome surprise, a validation of his years of hard work. He was unaware, however, that the strings of his fate were being pulled by the very person he had betrayed. Nicole, with her newfound power as a major shareholder, observed Brandon's career with a mix of detachment and precise calculation. From her vantage point, she influenced decisions subtly, ensuring that Brandon's path was fraught with challenges that appeared natural in the cutthroat corporate environment. Her first move was to influence the appointment of a new project manager, someone known for their rigorous standards and unyielding deadlines. This person was placed directly under Brandon, turning what he thought would be a straightforward project into a gauntlet of high expectations and tight turnarounds. Brandon began to feel the pressure. His nights were longer, his work more demanding. He confided in Nicole about the difficulties, unaware that she was the architect of his challenges. Nicole offered comfort, all the while gathering information about the company's dynamics and Brandon's state of mind. Meanwhile, Nicole expanded her influence beyond Brandon's immediate sphere. She used her position to advocate for policies and decisions that would indirectly affect his work, such as budget reallocations and shifts in strategic priorities. These moves were subtle enough not to arouse suspicion but significant enough to add layers of complexity to Brandon's role. The boardroom became a chessboard for Nicole. Each move was calculated, each decision a part of a larger plan. She attended meetings through virtual proxies, her identity still concealed, her insights and suggestions carrying the weight of her substantial shareholding. One particular board meeting was pivotal. A decision was to be made about the direction of a major project, one that Brandon was deeply involved in. Nicole knew that the project's success was crucial to Brandon's aspirations. She steered the conversation, through her proxies, towards an alternative strategy, one that would require a complete overhaul of Brandon's work. Brandon came home that evening, a look of frustration etched on his face. "They're changing the direction of the project," he said, throwing his briefcase on the table. "Months of work, and now they want something entirely different. It doesn't make any sense." Nicole listened, offering words of support. She watched the conflict in Brandon's eyes, a mix of anger and determination. She knew she was pushing him to his limits, but she couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. This was about justice, about making him understand the depth of his betrayal. As the weeks passed, Brandon became increasingly absorbed in his work, his stress levels rising. Nicole observed him, her heart heavy with a complex blend of sorrow and resolution. She had once dreamed of his success as their shared triumph. Now, his struggles were a silent testament to her unspoken revenge. In the solitude of her home office, Nicole reviewed her plans. Each step was leading to an eventual, unavoidable confrontation. She knew that the revelation of her identity and her role in his career would be a defining moment. Until then, she would continue to maneuver in the shadows, a ghost in the machine of Brandon's world. The game of corporate intrigue was far from over, and Nicole was determined to play it to the end. The balance of power in the Anderson household had shifted, though only one of its members was aware. Nicole, once content in the role of supportive wife and mother, had embraced a new identity. By day, she was the familiar face Brandon and their children loved and relied on. But by night, in the quiet of her home office, she transformed into a shrewd business strategist, wielding her influence over Brandon's company with precision. This double life was not without its challenges. Nicole felt the strain of her secret, the weight of the deception she was forced to maintain. She missed the simplicity of their past, the shared dreams and laughter. But the betrayal had changed everything, and there was no turning back. Her role in the company had grown significantly. Nicole's decisions were impacting not just Brandon but the entire corporate structure. She had become a shadowy figure in the industry, her true identity still a mystery to those she influenced. Her careful planning and insightful strategies were praised in board meetings, her suggestions shaping the company's future. Nicole found an unexpected sense of fulfillment in this work. It was more than just revenge, it was a realization of her potential, a potential that had lain dormant under the routine of domestic life. She discovered that she had a natural aptitude for business, a keen mind for strategy, and an ability to see the bigger picture. This revelation was both empowering and bittersweet. At home, she watched Brandon struggle under the pressure of his job. He was working harder than ever, his dreams of climbing the corporate ladder now a relentless uphill battle. Nicole's heart ached to see him like this, but she reminded herself of the pain his betrayal had caused. This was the consequence of his actions, a lesson he had to learn. Their conversations at home became a delicate dance. Brandon shared his frustrations and ambitions, not realizing that Nicole held the key to both. She offered support and advice, masking her intimate knowledge of the inner workings of his company. As Brandon's career became more demanding, Nicole took on more responsibilities at home. She balanced her secret role in the company with the needs of their children, ensuring their lives remained as normal as possible. It was a juggling act that required immense strength and resilience. Nicole's days were long, and her nights were longer. She often worked into the early hours of the morning, analyzing reports, planning her next move, and keeping abreast of every development at the company. Her home office became her sanctuary and her command center, the place where she transformed her pain and betrayal into power and control. Despite the challenges, Nicole felt a growing sense of confidence. She was no longer the woman who had naively trusted Brandon. She was now a force to be reckoned with, a hidden hand guiding the fate of a major tech company. As the months passed, Nicole knew that the moment of revelation was approaching. The day would come when she would step out of the shadows, revealing herself as the mastermind behind Brandon's altered career path. She anticipated this moment with a mixture of dread and anticipation. For now, she played her dual roles to perfection, waiting for the right time to unveil the truth. The double life of Nicole Anderson was a testament to her strength and ingenuity, a journey from betrayal to empowerment. The day of reckoning had arrived. In the crisp, cool air of an early morning, Nicole sat in her home office, her heart a tumultuous mix of emotions. Today, she would reveal her secret to Brandon, expose the depth of her betrayal and the magnitude of her revenge. It was the day she had been meticulously planning for months, yet as it dawned, she found herself grappling with a storm of feelings. Brandon, oblivious to the impending upheaval, prepared for an important board meeting. He was under the impression that today's meeting would cement his position in the company, possibly even lead to a promotion. He kissed Nicole goodbye, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of his presentation. Nicole watched him leave, a sense of finality washing over her. Once he left, she took a deep breath and began her own preparations. Dressed impeccably, she looked every bit the powerful businesswoman she had become. Her reflection in the mirror was that of a stranger, a far cry from the woman she was before the lottery win, before the discovery of Brandon's infidelity. At the company headquarters, the boardroom was abuzz with anticipation. Today's meeting was set to discuss major strategic shifts, and Brandon was at the center of it. He felt confident, ready to showcase his vision for the company's future. Little did he know that the real game changer was about to walk through the door. As Nicole entered the boardroom, a hush fell over the room. Her presence was commanding, her demeanor calm yet assertive. The board members, who knew her only as a significant but anonymous shareholder, were taken aback by her sudden appearance. Brandon's face went pale as he saw Nicole. Confusion, shock, and a dawning realization played across his features. The room was thick with tension, the air charged with unspoken questions. Nicole took her seat at the head of the table, her eyes meeting Brandon's. There was no anger in her gaze, only a resolute clarity. She began to speak, her voice steady and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering today. I believe it's time for some truths to be revealed," Nicole said, her eyes never leaving Brandon's. "I am the major shareholder who has been influencing the company's direction. And I am also Brandon's wife." The revelation sent a shockwave through the room. Murmurs and whispers filled the air as the board members processed this unexpected turn of events. Nicole continued, outlining her journey, from the moment she won the lottery to her discovery of Brandon's betrayal, and her decision to use her winnings to gain control over his career. She spoke of her actions, not with spite, but with a sense of justice, of righting a wrong that had been done to her. Brandon sat in stunned silence, his world crumbling around him. He had lost not just his wife's trust but also his grip on his career ambitions. The realization of Nicole's power, her intelligence, and her resilience hit him with full force. As Nicole concluded her speech, the room was filled with a new understanding. The board members looked at her with a mix of respect and awe. She had played the corporate game better than any of them, and she had done it from behind the scenes. The meeting ended with decisions made and strategies planned, but for Brandon, it was more than just a business meeting. It was the end of his deception and the beginning of a new reality. Nicole left the boardroom with her head held high, her mission accomplished. She had exposed the truth, reclaimed her power, and reshaped her life on her terms. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Nicole Anderson was no longer a victim of circumstance, she was a master of her destiny. Wife: uncover the truth behind her husband Ronald's disappearance with her savings $500,000, navigating a world of secrets and betrayal, which leads to a poignant mix of confrontation, revelation, and personal growth. Bianca Allen had always prided herself on her foresight and meticulous nature, especially when it came to finances. Nestled in the quiet comfort of their suburban home, she had been the one to manage their savings, diligently squirreling away a portion of their income for what she dreamt would be a serene and secure future. This future, as she envisioned, was to be shared with Ronald, her husband of 10 years, whose charming smile still managed to send a flutter through her heart. It was a typical Thursday evening when Bianca's world began to unravel. After a long day at the architecture firm where she worked, she logged into their joint bank account, intending to transfer some funds for an upcoming vacation. The screen blinked, and the numbers stared back at her, cold and unyielding. The account balance read a stark, incomprehensible zero. Confusion gave way to a numbing disbelief. Ronald must have transferred it by mistake, she muttered to herself, refusing to entertain any other possibility. But as minutes turned to hours without any sign of Ronald, a chilling realization began to dawn on her. He had never been late without calling, and he certainly wouldn't leave without a word. Panic and betrayal started to set in as the evening sky darkened. By midnight, with no sign of Ronald and no response to her frantic calls and messages, Bianca knew she had to face the truth. Her husband had disappeared, and so had their life savings of $500,000. The next morning, Bianca sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by years of financial statements, bank documents, and a steaming cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The events of the previous night felt surreal, like a fragment of a bad dream she couldn't shake off. She called the bank, only to be told what she already knew: the funds were withdrawn 2 days ago, in cash, by Ronald. Her friends and family urged her to let it go, to consider it a painful end to a chapter in her life. But Bianca couldn't. Not just because of the money, but because she needed answers. She needed to know why the man she loved, the man she trusted more than anyone, would betray her in such a cold and calculated manner. Determined, Bianca began her own investigation. She started by scouring through Ronald's personal belongings, looking for any clue he might have left behind. In his study, amidst the clutter of books and papers, she found a series of receipts from a small coffee shop in a part of town they seldom visited. It was a start, a faint trail, but it was all she had. As she stepped out of their house, a resolve settled over Bianca. She would find Ronald, not just for the sake of recovering her savings, but to confront the man who had shattered their shared dreams. She had no idea where her search would lead her or what secrets she would uncover along the way. But she knew one thing for certain: the truth was out there, and she would find it, no matter the cost. The faint morning light filtered through the blinds of Bianca's home office, casting long shadows across the floor. She sat there, surrounded by the remnants of her previous life, with Ronald photographs, mementos, and now, the cryptic receipts from the unfamiliar coffee shop. These small slips of paper were her only lead, and she clutched them like lifelines, determined to unravel the mystery they held. She decided to visit the coffee shop, a quaint, nondescript place tucked away in a less frequented part of town. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, announcing her presence. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside her. Bianca approached the counter, showing the barista one of Ronald's receipts. "Have you seen this man recently?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety knotting her stomach. The barista, a young man with a friendly demeanor, studied the receipt and then the photograph of Ronald she offered. His brow furrowed in concentration before he nodded slowly. "Yeah, he's been coming here a lot over the past few months. Always sat at the back, usually with someone else." "Someone else?" Bianca's heart skipped a beat. "Can you describe them?" The barista shrugged. "Not really. Different people, but there was this one guy he met with more than the others. Older, kinda serious looking. They would talk for hours." Grasping onto this new information, Bianca thanked the barista and made her way to the back of the cafe. She sat at the table Ronald had apparently favored, trying to picture him there, to sense some remnant of his presence. It felt surreal, being in a place that had been a part of his life she knew nothing about. As she pondered her next move, a man at a nearby table caught her attention. He was watching her with an intensity that was hard to ignore. After a moment, he approached her. "You're looking for Ronald, aren't you?" he asked in a low voice. Bianca's guard immediately went up. "Who are you?" The man introduced himself as Martin, claiming to be an old business associate of Ronald's. He seemed to know quite a bit about Ronald's visits to the cafe and hinted at knowing more about his sudden disappearance. His eyes held a mixture of concern and caution as he spoke. "Why should I trust you?" Bianca asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "I can't force you to," Martin replied. "But I believe I can help you find what you're looking for." Bianca was hesitant, but Martin's offer was the only lead she had. She agreed to work with him, albeit with a healthy dose of skepticism. Over the next few days, Bianca and Martin met regularly. He took her through a labyrinth of Ronald's lesser-known dealings, introducing her to people and places that were completely alien to her. Each encounter left her with more questions than answers, painting a picture of Ronald that was increasingly complex and mysterious. Bianca also began to notice a change in herself. The woman who had once been content with her orderly, predictable life was now delving into the unknown, driven by a mix of betrayal and an unyielding desire for the truth. She realized that this journey was not just about finding Ronald or the money, it was also about discovering who she really was beneath the layers of the life she had built with him. Bianca's quest to unravel the truth about Ronald's disappearance had taken her to places she never imagined she would venture. Each day brought new revelations, each more bewildering than the last. Martin, who had become her unlikely ally in this journey, navigated her through the murky waters of Ronald's secret life with an expertise that both impressed and unnerved her. Their search led them through the underbelly of the city, from dimly lit back alleys to upscale offices that belied the shady transactions conducted within. Bianca found herself in a world far removed from her comfortable suburban life, a world where trust was a luxury few could afford. One chilly evening, they met with a contact of Martin's, a man known only as Finch. In a secluded corner of a rundown bar, Finch divulged information that turned Bianca's understanding of her husband on its head. Ronald had been involved in a high-stakes investment scheme, one that was far from legal and fraught with danger. Bianca listened, her heart sinking with each word. The Ronald she knew, the man she had married, seemed like a distant memory, replaced by this stranger Finch described. Despite the risks, Bianca pressed on, driven by a need for closure. She found herself adapting to this new reality, her instincts sharpening, her resolve hardening. She began to see patterns in Ronald's behavior, clues that she had previously missed, and with Martin's help, she started connecting the dots. As they delved deeper, Bianca also began to see a different side of Martin. Beneath his rough exterior lay a man who had faced his own share of troubles. He spoke little of his past, but in his guarded expressions and the occasional glimpse of sorrow in his eyes, Bianca recognized a kindred spirit. They were both, in their own ways, seeking redemption. But with every step closer to Ronald, the danger escalated. They had a close call one night, narrowly escaping a group of men who seemed to be following them. The incident left Bianca rattled, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. She was playing a high-stakes game, one that could cost her more than just her missing savings. Despite the danger, Bianca's determination only grew stronger. She realized that this journey was no longer just about finding Ronald, it was about reclaiming her life from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. She was no longer the woman who sat helplessly at her kitchen table, poring over bank statements and wondering where it all went wrong. She was now a woman on a mission, unafraid to face whatever lay ahead. As the chapter closes, Bianca and Martin receive a tip about a possible sighting of Ronald in a distant city. Without hesitation, Bianca decides to follow this lead, setting the stage for the next phase of her journey. With each step, she sheds a part of her old self, embracing the unknown and the challenges it brings. She is ready to confront whatever lies ahead, to face Ronald and the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The cold, crisp air of the new city greeted Bianca as she stepped off the train, Martin by her side. They had traveled hundreds of miles following the lead that promised a sighting of Ronald. Bianca's heart was a tumult of emotions, hope, anger, fear, and a desperate longing for resolution. The city was a stark contrast to the familiarity of her home. Skyscrapers towered above, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. Bianca felt small in this vast, unfamiliar place, but her resolve did not waver. She was here for a purpose, and she would not leave until she fulfilled it. Their first stop was a modest hotel where the informant had spotted Ronald. As they navigated through the crowded lobby, Bianca's mind raced with possibilities. What would she say to Ronald when she saw him? How would she react? The uncertainty was overwhelming, but she pushed these thoughts aside. She needed to focus on the task at hand. At the hotel, they learned that Ronald had checked out 2 days earlier. However, the receptionist remembered him because he had been particularly anxious and kept to himself. This small piece of information was both a lead and a dead end. They were close, yet so far. Determined not to give up, Bianca and Martin scoured the city. They visited places Ronald might go, based on his past habits and preferences. It was during these wanderings that they stumbled upon a crucial clue. In a quiet, unassuming park, they found a bench where someone had carved Ron plus Bianca inside a heart many years ago on one of their early dates. Nearby, a local vendor remembered seeing a man who matched Ronald's description, looking lost and distressed. This discovery was a turning point for Bianca. She realized that the man she was chasing, the man who had betrayed her, was also the man she had once loved deeply. The complexity of her emotions was overwhelming, but it also brought a new understanding. Ronald was not just a perpetrator, he was a victim of his own demons. As Bianca grappled with these revelations, her relationship with Martin deepened. They shared stories of their past, their losses, their regrets. Martin spoke of a time when he too had made choices he wasn't proud of, and how those choices had led him down a path of redemption. Bianca found solace in his words, realizing that everyone has chapters in their life they wish they could rewrite. The chapter culminates in an unexpected breakthrough. A phone call from a contact of Martin's leads them to a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was here, the contact claimed, that Ronald had been hiding. As Bianca stood outside the door of the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest, she knew she was on the brink of confronting not just Ronald, but also the shattered pieces of her own life. She was about to face the man who had turned her world upside down, and in doing so, she hoped to find the missing pieces of herself that she had lost along the way. With a deep breath, Bianca knocked on the door, ready to face whatever lay on the other side. This was the moment of truth, the unraveling of a mystery that had consumed her life. She was ready to face it, no matter what it revealed. The dilapidated door of the apartment creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit, sparsely furnished room. Bianca's heart raced as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, searching for the face she had both longed and dreaded to see. There, in the far corner, sat Ronald, looking more like a shadow of the man she had once known. The air was thick with tension as Bianca stepped inside, Martin lingering at the doorway, a silent sentinel. Ronald's eyes, once so full of life and laughter, now held a weariness that made Bianca's heart clench. She wanted to scream, to ask him a million questions, but words failed her. It was Ronald who broke the silence. His voice, once so confident, now trembled as he began to unravel his tale. He spoke of a failed investment, a mounting debt, and threats from dangerous people he had become entangled with. In his desperation, he had taken the savings, hoping to turn things around, to protect Bianca from the truth and the danger. As Ronald recounted his story, Bianca felt a torrent of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also an aching sorrow. She saw before her a man broken by his mistakes, consumed by fear and regret. The enormity of his betrayal was not lost on her, yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of compassion. Martin stepped forward, his presence a reminder of the reality they faced. He had connections, he said, people who could help Ronald sort out the mess he was in. But it would require Ronald to face the consequences of his actions, to cooperate with the authorities. The room fell silent as Ronald considered his options. Then, with a nod that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies, he agreed. It was a decision that marked the beginning of a long, arduous journey towards redemption. Bianca watched as Ronald was taken into custody, a part of her feeling like she was watching the last piece of their shared life slip away. Yet, there was also a sense of closure, a bitter release from the web of lies and deceit that had entangled them. In the days that followed, Bianca found herself at a crossroads. The life she had known was irrevocably changed. She could no longer return to the blissful ignorance of before, nor could she completely let go of the love she had for Ronald. She spent long hours with Martin, discussing the future, pondering the lessons they had learned. Through her journey, Bianca had discovered a strength she never knew she had, a resilience that had carried her through the darkest of times. She had also found a friend in Martin, someone who had seen her at her worst and stood by her side. As the chapter closes, Bianca stands at the window of her home, gazing out at the world that continues to move forward, indifferent to the personal storms that rage within. She knows the road ahead will be challenging, filled with moments of doubt and pain. But she also knows that she is no longer the same woman who had been blindsided by her husband's betrayal. She is stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever the future holds. With a deep breath and a determined heart, Bianca steps out of her house, closing the door on a chapter of her life, ready to begin anew. She doesn't know what the future holds, but she knows she will face it head-on, with courage and hope. This is not the end of her story, but the beginning of something new.
A man discovers his girlfriend's betrayal involving a mysterious $3,000 deposit, leading to a painful journey of uncovering the truth and ultimately deciding to leave her in search of healing and a future built on trust. In the heart of the bustling city, where the constant hum of life never ceased, Ben and Aurelia crafted a small world of their own. It was a world woven from shared dreams, laughter, and an unspoken understanding that they were, in every way, made for each other. To outsiders, their relationship seemed almost cinematic, a perfect blend of romance and companionship. Their story wasn't one of love at first sight. Instead, it was a slow burn, a gradual intertwining of lives that started when they met at a mutual friend's art exhibit. Ben, an aspiring photographer, was immediately captivated by Aurelia's passion for painting. She, in turn, found a kindred spirit in Ben's artistic sensibilities and his gentle demeanor. Over time, their casual meetings evolved into coffee dates, movie nights, and eventually, a shared apartment filled with canvases, photographs, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Their home was a small, cozy place on the 5th floor of an old building, with a balcony overlooking the city. The walls were adorned with their artwork, Aurelia's vibrant paintings and Ben's black and white photographs. Every corner of the apartment told a story, a testament to their shared life and love. Ben found in Aurelia a partner who not only shared his interests but also challenged him. She had a way of looking at the world that made him see things in a different light. Her critiques of his work were always honest, pushing him to explore his talents further. Likewise, Ben's calm and thoughtful nature provided Aurelia with a sense of stability, a grounding force in her often chaotic, creative mind. Their weekends were sacred times, reserved for exploring hidden corners of the city or simply lounging at home. Ben loved these quiet moments the most. Aurelia, with her hair tied up, painting by the window as sunlight danced on her canvas, and he, with his camera in hand, capturing these fleeting, precious moments. Sometimes they would just sit on their balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise, talking about everything and nothing. Despite the harmony, there was an undercurrent of unspoken worry. Aurelia's art studio was struggling to stay afloat, and the weight of financial stress often lingered in her eyes. Ben did his best to support her, reassuring her that things would get better. He believed in her talent more than anything and often spent hours helping her set up exhibitions and promoting her work. Their 4th anniversary was approaching, and Ben wanted to make it special. He had been saving up to buy Aurelia a vintage easel she had admired in a local antique shop. His plan was to surprise her with it, along with a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin where they could escape the city's chaos and immerse themselves in nature's tranquility. As Ben looked through their photo albums, reminiscing about their journey together, he felt a surge of gratitude. Life had been kind in giving him Aurelia, a partner who complemented him in every way. He closed the album, smiling to himself, unaware that their seemingly perfect world was on the brink of a revelation that would test the very foundation of their relationship. The morning sun cast a warm glow through the sheer curtains of Ben and Aurelia's apartment, signaling the start of another day. Ben, already awake, prepared breakfast while Aurelia continued to sleep, her chest rising and falling gently with each breath. He glanced at her occasionally, his heart swelling with affection. Today, he decided, would be the day he'd buy the vintage easel for their anniversary. After breakfast, while Aurelia was showering, Ben decided to tidy up the living room. As he picked up a pile of magazines from the coffee table, a small, folded bank statement slipped out from between the pages and fluttered to the floor. Curiosity piqued, he picked it up, intending to place it back with the magazines. However, a glance at the paper stopped him in his tracks. It was a bank statement in Aurelia's name, showing a recent deposit of $3,000. Ben's brow furrowed. They had always been transparent about their finances, a necessity given their modest means. This sudden, unexplained deposit seemed out of place. He couldn't recall Aurelia mentioning anything about receiving a large sum of money. Perhaps it was a payment for one of her paintings. But she would have told him, she always shared her successes, no matter how small. A whirlwind of questions began to swirl in his mind. Should he ask her about it? But what if it was a surprise for him, for their anniversary? He didn't want to ruin any surprise she might be planning. Yet, the nagging feeling in his gut wouldn't subside. The amount was substantial, and its mysterious origin was troubling. With a heavy heart, Ben decided to keep his discovery to himself, at least for now. He folded the statement and put it back where he found it, his mind racing with possibilities. He tried to focus on his upcoming plans, but the image of the statement lingered, casting a shadow over his thoughts. Later that day, as Ben visited the antique shop to purchase the easel, he found himself distracted. The shop owner's cheerful chatter barely registered in his mind. He completed the purchase mechanically, his thoughts elsewhere. The easel, wrapped carefully, lay in the back seat of his car, but the excitement he had felt earlier was replaced by a gnawing unease. Back at home, Aurelia seemed her usual self, chatting animatedly about a new art project. Ben tried to engage in the conversation, but his responses were half-hearted. Aurelia noticed his distraction and asked if everything was okay. He brushed it off as tiredness, not wanting to voice his concerns without any concrete evidence. That night, as they lay in bed, Ben watched the soft light of the moon cast shadows across the room. Aurelia's steady breathing was a familiar comfort, yet tonight, it felt different. The seed of doubt planted by the bank statement had taken root in his mind, casting a pall over the trust and openness that had been the bedrock of their relationship. As he lay awake, Ben realized that this discovery was only the beginning. He needed to find out the truth behind the mysterious deposit, but he feared what that truth might reveal. The thought of confronting Aurelia filled him with an uncomfortable mix of apprehension and urgency. What he would uncover in the days to come could potentially change everything between them. The next few days passed in a haze for Ben. He found himself going through the motions, his mind constantly returning to the unexplained bank deposit. The once comforting routine of their life together now felt strained, punctuated by Ben's growing unease. He watched Aurelia, looking for any sign, any clue that might explain the mysterious $3,000. But there was nothing, just the usual ebb and flow of their daily life. Ben's internal struggle deepened. He loved Aurelia, trusted her implicitly, yet the unanswered question of the deposit gnawed at him. He considered bringing it up casually, but the right moment never seemed to come. The fear of what he might discover held him back. One evening, while Aurelia was at her studio, Ben decided to take a more active approach. He logged onto their shared computer, intending to look through her emails for any mention of a recent sale or commission. He hesitated for a moment, feeling a twinge of guilt for invading her privacy. But the need for answers overpowered his reluctance. As he sifted through her inbox, he found nothing out of the ordinary, just correspondence with art galleries, potential buyers, and fellow artists. However, a series of emails exchanged with an unfamiliar name caught his attention. The tone was overly familiar, and the content, though vague, hinted at private meetings. The last email mentioned a "thank you" for something, but there were no specifics. Ben's heart raced. Could this be related to the deposit? The possibility sent a chill down his spine. He delved deeper, searching for any other clues. His search led him to a hidden folder in Aurelia's email account, filled with more messages from the same person. These were more explicit, discussing arrangements for meetings and mentioning financial transactions. The pieces began to fall into place, painting a distressing picture. Ben felt a mixture of shock, betrayal, and disbelief. The realization that Aurelia might be involved with someone else, and that money was involved, was too much to bear. He sat back, trying to process what he had just discovered. His mind raced with questions. Why would she do this? Were they in such dire financial straits that she felt this was the only way out? Or was there something more to their relationship that he hadn't seen? The next few hours were a blur as Ben struggled to come to terms with his findings. He felt lost, unsure of what to do next. The apartment, once a haven of love and creativity, now felt suffocating. He needed air, space to think. Grabbing his coat, he left the apartment and walked aimlessly through the city streets, the cold night air barely registering. As he walked, his thoughts turned to their relationship, the trust they had built, the plans they had made. It all seemed like a lie now. The pain of betrayal was sharp, cutting deep into his heart. How could he confront Aurelia? Could their relationship survive this? Did he even want it to? The night grew darker, the city lights a blur through his tear-filled eyes. Ben knew he couldn't ignore what he had discovered. The truth, however painful, had to be faced. Tomorrow, he would confront Aurelia. Tomorrow, he would seek the answers he dreaded. But tonight, he walked alone, mourning the loss of the life he thought he knew. The dawn brought no comfort to Ben. The weight of his discovery hung heavy on his shoulders as he returned to the apartment. He had walked the streets all night, wrestling with his emotions, trying to piece together the fragments of the truth he had uncovered. Now, he had to face Aurelia, to confront the reality of their fractured relationship. Aurelia was in the kitchen when Ben entered. She greeted him with her usual bright smile, which faltered as she took in his haggard appearance. "Ben, what's wrong? You look. Did something happen?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Ben's heart raced. This was the moment of truth. He took a deep breath and held out the bank statement he had found days earlier. "Aurelia, I need to know about this. Where did this money come from?" Aurelia's eyes widened in shock as she glanced at the statement. A range of emotions played across her face: surprise, confusion, and then, realization. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet Ben's searching eyes. "Aurelia, please," Ben urged, his voice a mix of desperation and pain. "I need the truth." There was a long, tense silence before Aurelia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think, Ben. I didn't know how to tell you. We were struggling, the studio was failing, and I didn't want to burden you further." Ben felt a chill run down his spine. "Tell me," he insisted. Aurelia hesitated, then began to recount her story. She had been approached by a wealthy art collector, someone she had met at a gallery opening months ago. He had offered her a deal, private time with him in exchange for financial support. It was a desperate move, born out of her fear of losing her studio, her passion. She justified it as a temporary solution, a necessary evil. As Aurelia spoke, Ben felt as if the ground beneath him was crumbling. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, had become a stranger. Betrayal, hurt, and anger swirled within him, a tumultuous storm that threatened to engulf him. "Why, Aurelia? Why didn't you come to me? We could have figured it out together," Ben said, his voice breaking. "I was scared, Ben. Scared of losing everything, scared of disappointing you. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't realize how wrong I was until it was too late," Aurelia replied, tears streaming down her face. The room felt suffocating as the magnitude of her confession settled in. Ben struggled to process her words, to understand how the love and trust they had shared could have led to this moment. The pain was overwhelming, a sharp, unrelenting ache in his chest. "I'm sorry, Ben. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to protect what I loved, but I see now how foolish I was," Aurelia said, reaching out to him. But Ben stepped back, his heart closing in on itself. "I don't know if I can get past this, Aurelia. Trust was the foundation of our relationship, and now I don't know what's left." Aurelia sobbed, her body racked with guilt and regret. Ben stood there, torn between his love for her and the betrayal he felt. The revelation had changed everything. The future they had envisioned together was now a shattered dream, lying in pieces at their feet. In that moment, Ben knew that their relationship would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the trust they had once shared was irreparably broken. And without trust, what was left? In the days that followed, the apartment that once echoed with laughter and love now lay submerged in a deafening silence. Ben moved through the space like a ghost, haunted by memories at every turn. The vibrant paintings on the walls, once symbols of Aurelia's talent and passion, now felt like stark reminders of the chasm that had opened between them. Aurelia tried to reach out, her apologies and explanations a constant undercurrent, but Ben felt trapped in a fog of betrayal and disillusionment. He struggled with conflicting emotions, the love he still felt for Aurelia, intertwined with a sense of betrayal so profound it threatened to overshadow everything else. The decision to leave was not an easy one. It came after long nights of soul-searching, of weighing the remnants of their love against the erosion of trust. Ben realized that while forgiveness was possible, forgetting was not. The foundation of their relationship had been irrevocably damaged. Love, he understood now, was not just about affection and companionship, it was also about trust, honesty, and facing life's challenges together. The day Ben decided to leave, the sky was overcast, mirroring the turmoil within him. He packed his belongings, a few clothes, his camera, and the photo albums that chronicled their time together. With each item he placed in his bag, a memory surfaced, bittersweet and poignant. Aurelia watched him pack, her eyes brimming with tears. "Ben, is there really no way we can get past this? I love you, and I'm so sorry for what I did," she pleaded. Ben paused, his heart aching. "I believe you're sorry, Aurelia, and part of me still loves you. But the trust we had is broken. Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of what happened. I need to leave, for both our sakes." He zipped up his bag and took a final look around the apartment. This was more than just leaving a place, it was leaving a shared life, a future they had planned together. He approached Aurelia, his eyes meeting hers for a moment. "I hope you find your way, Aurelia. I hope you find happiness." With those parting words, Ben stepped out of the apartment, closing the door on a chapter of his life. The outside world seemed starkly different, as if he was seeing it through new eyes. The future was uncertain, a path uncharted, but he felt a sense of resolve. As he walked down the street, the first drops of rain began to fall, each one like a tear for what was lost. He realized that this was not just an ending, but also a beginning. A beginning of healing, of rediscovering himself, of moving forward with the lessons learned from love and loss. The rain grew heavier, but Ben continued to walk, his steps firm and purposeful. He knew the road to recovery would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them. In the midst of his pain, he found a glimmer of hope, a belief that someday, he would find love again, a love built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. For now, he walked alone, but he was at peace, ready to embrace whatever the future held.
Abyssal Descent is about a bride whose life falls apart and becomes very sad after her cheating is revealed on her wedding day. Ilara Winthrop stood in the luminous embrace of the grand cathedral, her wedding gown cascading like a waterfall of silken dreams. The stained glass windows cast a kaleidoscope of colors across the aisle, mirroring the spectrum of emotions playing across her face. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the day she would unite forever with Orion Maddox, her childhood sweetheart turned soon-to-be husband. Orion, tall and striking, stood at the altar, his gaze locked onto Ilara as she approached. Their guests, an assembly of family and friends, looked on with beaming smiles, unaware of the tempest brewing beneath the surface. As Ilara walked down the aisle, her father's arm a reassuring presence, she tried to quell the rising tide of anxiety within her. She had harbored a secret, one that threatened to shatter the idyllic scene before her. Reaching the altar, Ilara took her place beside Orion. He looked at her, his eyes a mix of love and something unreadable. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the sacred space. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a loud drum in the silence of her conscience. Then, the moment came. The words that should have sealed their union. "Do you, Orion Maddox, take Ilara Winthrop to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Orion's voice, usually so calm and assured, faltered. There was a pause, heavy and suffocating, before he spoke, his words slicing through the air like a cold blade. "I cannot." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Ilara's heart stopped. Time seemed to fracture, splintering into shards of disbelief. Orion turned to face the crowd, his voice steady but laced with a pain that cut deeper than anger. "I cannot marry a woman who has betrayed my trust, who has shattered the very foundation of our relationship." The world spun around Ilara. Whispers swelled like a rising tide, eyes boring into her with shock and judgment. Her secret, her grave mistake, was no longer hers alone. Orion had discovered her infidelity, and in the most public and devastating way, he had exposed it. Ilara's father stepped back, his expression a complex tapestry of confusion and disappointment. She wanted to speak, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but words failed her. She stood there, a statue of despair, as Orion continued. I loved you, Elara, more than words could ever express. But love is built on trust, and you have broken that trust irrevocably. He turned then, walking away from the altar, away from her, his steps echoing like a death knell. Elara watched him go, her vision blurred by tears, her dream wedding crumbling into a nightmare. The guests began to murmur and rise, a chaotic symphony of movement and sound. Elara felt hands guiding her, leading her away, but it was all distant, unreal. Her heart was shattered, her world eclipsed by the shadow of her own making. As she was ushered out of the cathedral, the last thing Elara saw was the stained glass window, its colors now a mocking reminder of the joy that was supposed to be hers. In that moment, she realized the full weight of her actions and the irrevocable change they had wrought on her life. The door closed behind her, sealing her fate. The bride left alone, her vows unspoken, her heart eclipsed by a lie. The days following the disastrous wedding were a blur for Elara Winthrop. The once vibrant and social butterfly had cocooned herself away in her small apartment, the curtains perpetually drawn, blocking out the probing eyes of the world. Each morning brought with it a fresh wave of shame and regret, and each night was a long, lonely stretch of introspection and tears. The social media frenzy was merciless. Elara's phone, once a portal to friends and a calendar full of engagements, now felt like a device designed solely to deliver her daily dose of humiliation. Pictures of the abandoned altar, speculative posts, and harsh judgments filled her feeds. She wanted to reach out, to explain her side of the story, but the words never came. Instead, she remained silent, her reputation tarnished by a scandal of her own making. Her friends, or those she once considered friends, distanced themselves. Invitations ceased, and her calls went unanswered. Her parents, though supportive, had a hard time hiding their disappointment. The Winthrops were a well-respected family, and Elara's actions had cast a long, dark shadow over their name. Conversations with her parents became strained, filled with unspoken reproaches and sighs of what could have been. Work offered no respite either. Elara was a talented graphic designer, but her presence in the office became a source of awkwardness. Colleagues who used to greet her with smiles now offered only fleeting glances or hushed whispers as she passed. Her boss, Mr. Jenkins, had called her into his office, his expression a mix of concern and disapproval. Elara, I understand you're going through a difficult time, he had said, but you need to keep your personal issues outside of work. The team needs to focus, and right now, your situation is a distraction. Elara nodded, her throat tight, unable to articulate the turmoil inside her. She returned to her desk, her work now a mechanical process, void of the creativity and passion she once poured into it. The solitude was suffocating. The apartment that she and Orion had shared, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, now echoed with the ghosts of what could have been. The engagement photos still hung on the walls, a cruel reminder of her lost love and the happiness she had sabotaged. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the apartment amplified the noise in her head, the guilt, the self-loathing, the endless loop of what-ifs. She replayed that day at the altar over and over, each time hoping for a different ending, but the outcome was always the same. Elara had cheated on Orion with a fleeting, thoughtless fling. It was a mistake, a lapse in judgment during a moment of vulnerability. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized that one moment was all it took to unravel the tapestry of trust and love they had woven together. The shadow of disgrace followed her everywhere, a constant, unrelenting reminder of her betrayal. Elara Winthrop, once the life of every party, now found herself shunned, alone, and drowning in the consequences of her actions. The world outside continued its relentless pace, but for Elara Winthrop, time seemed to have stalled in the wake of her disgrace. The once cheerful and bustling apartment now felt like a mausoleum of her former life. The walls, adorned with memories of happier times, seemed to mock her with their permanence. Elara found herself spending hours just staring at them, lost in a sea of regret. As days turned into weeks, the initial shock of the scandal began to fade, replaced by a deeper, more pervasive sense of loss. Elara's thoughts often drifted to Orion, the love they had shared, and the future they had planned. The realization that she was the architect of her own ruin only intensified her despair. Her once meticulous grooming and dressing habits had given way to neglect. The mirror reflected a stranger, a woman with hollow eyes and unkempt hair, a stark contrast to the vibrant Elara she once knew. She began to avoid her own reflection, finding it too painful a reminder of what she had become. The few times she ventured outside were under the cloak of darkness. The city, which once felt like an open playground, now seemed like an obstacle course of judgment and pity. The familiar streets whispered her name, each step a reminder of her fall from grace. Elara's professional life, once a source of pride, had lost its sheen. Her work, once filled with creativity and passion, had become a monotonous chore. She could feel Mr. Jenkins' patience wearing thin as her performance continued to decline. The once supportive glances from him had now turned into looks of frustration and disappointment. One evening, as she sat listlessly at her desk, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hesitantly, she opened it and her heart skipped a beat. It was from Orion. Just a few words, but they cut through her like a knife. "I hope you find what you're looking for. Goodbye, Elara." That message was the final blow, the last link to her past life severed. She felt a sense of finality, a realization that there was no going back, no redemption. The weight of her actions, the enormity of her betrayal, finally settled in her heart, heavy and unmovable. Sleep became her only escape, though it was often restless and haunted by dreams of what could have been. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, her body drenched in sweat, as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her once again. The apartment, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. The silence was oppressive, the loneliness a constant companion. Elara found herself talking to the walls, to the photos, to Orion's abandoned belongings, seeking some semblance of connection, however imaginary. One night, in a fit of rage and despair, she hurled a vase against the wall. It shattered, scattering pieces of glass across the floor, a physical manifestation of her shattered life. She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, as she picked up the pieces. Each shard was a reflection of her mistakes, her regrets, her broken dreams. Elara Winthrop, once the epitome of joy and vivacity, now found herself in a world of broken glass, each piece a reminder of the life she had destroyed. The path ahead was unclear, the wounds deep, and the journey to redemption uncertain. The relentless march of time continued unabated, yet for Elara Winthrop, each day was a stagnant echo of the last. The once vibrant hues of her life had faded to the monochrome of solitude. Her apartment, a labyrinth of memories, resonated with the whispers of a life that once was full of love, laughter, and dreams, now replaced by an oppressive silence. As the weeks turned into months, the initial shock of her fall from grace was supplanted by a numbing acceptance. The scandal that had once set social media ablaze had simmered down, but the embers of her disgrace continued to smolder in hushed conversations and sideways glances. Elara had become a ghost in her own life, haunting the fringes of the world she once inhabited. Her once close-knit circle of friends had dissipated, leaving her in a void of isolation. Attempts to reach out were met with polite excuses or, more often, a deafening silence. She understood their reticence. Association with her was a blemish they were unwilling to bear. The vibrant social life she had once taken for granted had vanished, leaving her to grapple with the unfamiliar territory of loneliness. Work had become her only escape from the four walls of her apartment, but even there, she was an island unto herself. The camaraderie and teamwork that had once defined her workplace now seemed like distant memories. Colleagues interacted with her out of necessity, their conversations devoid of warmth. The creative spark that had once defined her career had dimmed, her projects now a reflection of her internal turmoil, competent but lacking the vibrancy and innovation that had once been her hallmark. In the quiet of her apartment, Elara often found herself speaking aloud, if only to break the silence that enveloped her. She talked to the photographs on the wall, to Orion's belongings that she couldn't bring herself to part with, to the very walls that confined her. These one-sided conversations were a balm to her loneliness, yet they also served as a poignant reminder of what she had lost. Her parents, still reeling from the scandal, maintained a strained relationship with her. Their calls, once frequent and full of affection, had dwindled to obligatory check-ins. The disappointment in their voices was palpable, a constant reminder of the pain she had inflicted not just on herself, but on those she loved. Elara's relationship with her own reflection had grown increasingly turbulent. The mirror, once a testament to her confidence and vitality, now revealed a stranger, a woman marked by the ravages of regret and sorrow. Avoiding her own gaze, she would often dress in the dim light of dawn, unwilling to confront the reality of her own existence. Nights were the hardest. The darkness seemed to amplify her isolation, each tick of the clock a reminder of her stagnant existence. Sleep, when it came, was a restless affair, fraught with dreams of accusatory faces and voices echoing her own self-condemnation. In her solitude, Elara had taken to writing. Pages filled with confessions, apologies, and reflections, a tangible manifestation of her inner turmoil. Yet, these words were meant for no one's eyes but her own. They were a testament to her journey through the wilderness of remorse, a chronicle of a soul grappling with the consequences of its actions. Elara Winthrop, once the life and soul of every gathering, now found solace in the whispers of empty rooms, her voice the only counterpoint to the silence that had become her constant companion. The path to redemption seemed as elusive as ever, a distant light flickering in the vast darkness of her new reality. The relentless passage of time did little to heal the wounds of Elara Winthrop. The once effervescent and lively soul had been reduced to a mere shadow, drifting through the days in a haze of despondency and regret. Her apartment, once a haven of love and warmth, had become her solitary cell, its walls echoing the depths of her despair. Elara's life had contracted to the point where work was her only tether to the outside world. But even there, she was a ghost, her presence barely acknowledged, her contributions overlooked. Mr. Jenkins had once seen potential in her, but now his glances held only pity and resignation. Her work, once a source of pride and joy, had become a burdensome chore, each task a monumental effort in her state of listlessness. The world outside seemed to move on, indifferent to her plight. Friends who had once shared her joys and sorrows were now just distant memories, their laughter and chatter replaced by the oppressive silence of her apartment. Her phone, once a buzzing hub of activity, now lay dormant, a stark reminder of her isolation. In the depth of her solitude, Elara's thoughts often turned dark. The night brought no respite, only endless hours of introspection, each thought a spiral deeper into the abyss of her own making. The darkness seemed to close in on her, its weight crushing, its expanse endless. Her parents' attempts to reach out were met with monosyllabic responses or silence. They tried to bridge the chasm that had opened between them, but Elara had built walls too high for their words of comfort to scale. The once cherished family bond was now strained, taut with the unspoken pain and disappointment.